What's up, geeks and gamers? It's Jeremy coming to you with another interview, and today is a very awesome day for me because I am interviewing someone I can actually call my friend, who's also part of the Jackson family, Taj Jackson on Geeks and Gamers. What the hell? On your birthday. Happy
Yes.
birthday, man.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank you very much.
birthday. It
Thank
is
you.
an honor to have you. You and I have gotten to know each other over the last several months, and you know, we've had some really interesting and awesome phone conversations. And I'm still kind of at this point, I'm still shocked that you are a fan of Geeks and Gamers
Big fan.
and me.
Yeah.
So that is cool, man. So how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good today. You know, I mean, I'm getting all these messages, these happy birthday messages, which, you know, are overwhelming, but in a good way, you know.
Yeah,
I mean, to
yeah.
have a lot of support and stuff like that. So it's been a good day. And I always make a point on my birthday to do something memorable so I can look back and go, like, I got to photograph Stan Lee on one of my birthdays. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
So now I'm doing this. So
that is awesome, man. Yeah, I really do. I mean, I told you this on the phone when we talked, and I told people on my live stream the other day when I was talking about you, and I was like, I was talking to Taj one time. He's in Las Vegas with Janet at a concert. I'm like, what?
I even forgot about that. That's how, I shouldn't say privilege, but that's how, like, I don't even think like that, you know, like,
yeah.
That's not even, you know, but yeah, I mean, so lucky and so, you know, to be there and to be able just to hang out with her and just, like, you know, and it's surreal. It really is.
Yeah. It's surreal for me to you know, I mean, again, I grew up as a major, like, the two most prominent people in terms of, like, celebrities in my life, in terms of just, you know, the two most important people are Michael Jackson and Michael Jordan. Those are the two biggest names of my lifetime.
Oh yeah,
and
of course.
You know, so I was, you know, I had the zipper jacket growing up. I was, you know, I was obsessed with Michael Jackson. And, you know, we'll go ahead and I want to just jump right into the Michael Jackson aspect of things because I, as a person, and this is a conversation maybe you'll remember that we had, but you told me the first time we talked that you were just a fan of mine. You were watching a stream. I never really talked about Michael. And then someone sent like a super chat or something or a question. And I responded and you said, I held my breath because I'm like, oh man, I'm a fan of Jeremy. What is he going to say? And, you know, I said, I never believed Michael Jackson was guilty of anything. Yeah. Obviously, I don't know this in terms of like, I don't have firsthand knowledge, but just looking at the situation and looking at Michael and the type of person he was, and then looking at how all of the details and the flaws and all of the accusations were happening. And, you know, you told me, you're like, man, I was so happy when you said that, you know, and I didn't even know you were watching, which was the crazy part. So, you know, tell me a little bit about this entire path, because you've become one of the #1 advocates for, you know, Michael, obviously growing up, being in his family. He's your uncle.
Yeah.
So tell me about how that entire path has been for you overall.
It's been interesting. And yes, I did. I held my breath. I was like, please, you know, I don't want to have to stop watching this channel, or at least I don't have to, like, it would have ruined the magic behind it and stuff like that. And I was so happy. But for me, I've always been someone kind of quiet. You know, I have a band with my brothers called 3T, and I'm always the one in the background. Like, I'm letting them, you know, be the Lennon or McCarthy, and I'm like the George Harrison. I'm like the one that's like, okay, you know, you guys up there, you know, I'm cool back here. And so what happened with this whole, like, with leaving Neverland and the scandal and all that stuff is I was kind of forced into the forefront in a way, because it's like everyone was so scared to say something, to say that. It was like when Me Too and Time's Up was at its height and they were looking for blood. And I'm like, wait a minute. I spent thousands and thousands of hours with this person, you know, from literally a baby all the way up to, you know, 3 to 4 months before he passed. And it's like, I know this person. I also have the unique experience, and it's not a great experience, but I've been molested as a child on my mom's side of the family, you know, so that's another perspective that puts me in a different situation than anyone else that can speak about it. You know, I have that sensitivity aspect of it, which is why, if you notice, I was very lenient towards Me Too and Time's Up, because I didn't want to derail it if it was something that some people were going to speak out that needed to speak out. But I'm a firm believer you listen to everyone doesn't mean you believe everyone, because I know about agendas and all that stuff. And so, and I don't blindly believe anyone. And I think that's dangerous to do in that way.
Absolutely.
So I was like, and I knew Wade, which was one of the guys that was accusing him. And Wade was just someone that I was just like, okay, that's it. You know, once I found out it was Wade, all bets were off. I went into a mode of like, no, you're not going to do this. You know, I know you, and you're not going to do this. You're not going to scam, you know, the estate of, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, because you're, I don't even want to say, yeah, I'll say it, failed career. You know, he burnt a lot of bridges in his dance community, and he has nowhere to go now. So now he's going to sue Michael Jackson, basically, you know, is what happened. And so I went from being Mr. Shy, which me and Brandy, who are pretty much the two that have been out the most in terms of, you know, defending, are the two shyest Jacksons in our generation. So it's really weird, but we're also, I hate injustice, and so does Brandy. And Brandy dated Wade for 7 years, so we know him, like, you know, very well. And so I think that was it. It just it had to be me, and it had to be Brandy. And the family, we've always turned the other cheek. You know, we've always been like, and we grew up with our uncle even saying, just ignore it, you know, and all that stuff. But it's a different time now. It's a time where if you ignore something, you're guilty, you know, or you're hiding something.
Yep.
So, and I'm smart enough, and I'm not saying my family isn't, I just follow social media, so I know that's what it is. So I'm like, we have to say something, and we have to defend this, because it's not true.
Absolutely. Very well said. Very well said.
You.
And, you know, one of the things that I focus in on this channel a lot is the Hollywood agenda, you know, the white liberals out there that are always claiming how much they're for, you know, minorities and, you know, non-white dudes or whatever. And I think you have a very interesting and internal knowledge of how that Hollywood agenda, you know, can operate. What is your perspective on that? Because for some reason, Michael Jackson was their #1 enemy, and I still can't figure out why. So can you give any insight as to why they just were so anti-Michael Jackson?
I think, you know, what it is I've always said my uncle's a smokescreen. You know, he's the one that it's like, he's larger than life in terms of the media. So if there's any other news that, like an Harvey Weinstein story, which it was proven that in 1993 or 94 that Harvey hired a media company to make up lies about certain celebrities, and Michael Jackson was one of them, just to deflect from his allegations. Right. And so, and this is a 93, 94-ish time period. So that's what they do. They use my uncle, basically. It's like, and it's a pattern. I mean, even when Harvey's movie came out on Sundance, his movie came out the same event that Leaving Neverland did, and you didn't even know about it, Untouchable, because Michael Jackson's Leaving Neverland sucked all the energy, and it was a late entry. It was an entry that they pulled favors for. So it's like, oh, let's focus on Michael's, you know, forget Hollywood, you know, focus on Michael. And same thing with, and I haven't even seen it yet or whatever, but Off the Record or whatever, that was originally the two directors that did that movie, the one about, forgot the guy's name, but I'll say it when I remember again. Okay. It was originally supposed to be a Harvey Weinstein documentary, and then Oprah came on board, and that changed into another person in that way. So they're kind of protecting their own in that way. And my uncle's never been part of Hollywood. That's the thing about it. He's always been outside of Hollywood. They've dangled a carrot in front of him, like, oh yeah, you can act, or you can star in this, or you can, you know, they've picked him for his ideas, you know, and his brain, but they've never let him into it. And he's never honestly wanted to be part of it once he found out what it was, which is basically, I mean, there's a lot of skeletons. It's a lot of it's being uncovered now, which is interesting. You know, you only pray that it does. A lot of people are getting found out, or at least their ties are getting found out in that way. And so they're panicking, and they're also, it's like, hey, no, forget that. Look at this. Yeah. In that way. Look at Michael Jackson. Even though there's not one fact, you know, his house has been raided from whether it's Neverland or Havenhurst 2 or 3 times when he wasn't even there, unannounced, didn't find one shred of evidence. You know, they have no evidence, and none. And, you know, FBI investigated off and on for 10 years, no evidence. You know, Epstein investigated, you know, less than a year, and they had all this mountain of evidence. They just sat on it. But it's like, that's the difference. Same with the raid. They found out evidence when they did the raid. So it's like, when you're guilty, it's easy to find things on the person.
Right.
You know, my uncle, because my uncle's was at that point the most, I'm trying to be humble, but at the same time realistic. He was probably the most famous person in the world.
I agree. No, absolutely.
I mean, so I'm trying to be, I'm trying to be humble, but at the same time be honest with what he was. And so, and probably one of the most photographed or followed people in the world. So it's like, there is no realistic logic in terms of, oh, you know, he was able to do this and this, you know. It's like, no, he was followed, he was photographed, he was documented, you know, in every way. I mean, there's books about every day of his life, you know, what he did. And so it's, or where he was. So this idea that he was able to pull this off, you know, as a genius, mastermind genius, it's unrealistic.
Yeah. I mean, and, you know, and I'm not going to, you know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know because you've been on with Razor Fist, but Razor Fist, you know, his videos are unbelievable. And
unbelievable.
You know, and I was talking to someone, sorry to interrupt. I was talking to someone the other day and cause they're younger than me. And they basically said, like, growing up, I only believed Michael Jackson was a pedophile because that was all I knew him of. And he's like, it wasn't until Razor Fist videos where I realized it was all a lie. You know, it was all garbage. It was all nonsense. And that is such an incredible thing to hear firsthand, because for me to hear that people didn't have the real perspective of who Michael Jackson was, it's almost hard to comprehend at my age. And I'm 40 years old. So, you know, that was, to me, you know, I've always said Michael is like, I can look at someone like Elvis, I can look at other people, and I can go, okay, if you put Elvis like in today's generation, I think he would be talented, he would be great, and he would be, but I don't think he'd be a pioneer. He wouldn't be. Michael Jackson, you can put him in any era of any time, anywhere, and he is going to be the best. And there's nobody going to be close, because the talent that he had and his ability to entertain was just second to none. So just to hear that people, you know, younger than me just grew up not knowing that, it just really shows you the damage that the media did to an entire generation of people.
The narrative. I mean, but you know more than anything from just, you know, me watching your channel, you know, when they have a narrative, they stick to it. And it doesn't matter how much evidence you present opposite of that narrative. I'm like, hey, here's the facts. You know, that train station didn't exist when James said that he got molested. Like, it never existed. So he's lying in this point. Oh, no, he's not lying. He just got his dates wrong. It's like, no, he's lying. And so they'll stick to a narrative, and you can't tell them different in that way. And I think that's a thing. And when it's one channel, it's one thing, or it's, you know, but when they gang up and they're all in agreement, it's literally impossible to change that narrative. Yeah. You know, so that's why people like Razor Fist, a lot of people on YouTube, you know, who are kind of, I say, freedom thinkers in terms of they think for themselves, and logic is their number one, you know, weapon, which is crazy that logic would, you know, it's like logic is logic. And but I think there are a lot of people just follow the flow, and it's like, oh, I heard this, so that's what it is. And and you know, logic is different to me. I've always been someone that thinks and goes, okay, that was their story. What is the real story? What's the truth? You know, do they line up with it? If they line up with the truth, great. But if they don't, but I'm going to research this even further. And so Razor Fist was a breath of fresh air, just because it was at a time when I was getting, I don't want to say discouraged, but it was like so serious. And he brought some humor to it as well. Yes. In a way, I mean, which it was just the magic of Razor Fist, but it made me laugh. But also I was like, oh my gosh, you know, someone else gets it. Someone else understands, you know, the frustration our family has about the media agenda.
Yeah. And he doesn't even, you know, he doesn't even seem like the type that would be like the number one advocate for Michael Jackson. He was like this hard rocker, you know, metalhead, and he's sitting here dropping facts about Michael, and it just adds so much more credibility to what he's saying, because you look at that guy, and he's such a hard ass, and you're like, yeah, but he's sitting here passionately defending Michael Jackson with one simple thing called facts. Yeah, he's just with facts. It's that simple. It's all it is. And it's pretty awesome. And so yeah, those videos are amazing, and he gets so much you know, recognition for those, deservedly so. So one thing that I have people bring up to me over the years about Michael is that he was, by our standards, by normal people standards, he was
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
And I don't really argue that point, because from our perspective, Michael was weird. Now,
Mhm.
my defense of it had always been, and we may get into some things that you don't want to talk about, which is totally fine, whatever. But I always said, from the things I've heard, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on some of
I
this,
will.
but
Yeah,
based on what
of
I've heard,
course.
like from a young age, we do know that Michael Jackson was arguably one of the most famous people in the world at a very young age. And when
Very
he's
young.
on stage, he was very insecure about his physical appearance. There are,
Mhm.
reports that there was some physical abuse or mental abuse from the family. And then I've always said, even as an adult, if you have to go out in front of the world after you've been told this about your appearance, it can mess you up mentally. So
Mhm.
at a young age, I don't think any human being has ever had to deal with the collection of craziness that Michael Jackson had. So growing up, he had kind of a distorted kind of, path to, his life, where as a young child, he was treated as an adult. So by the time he became an adult, he really wanted to find his childhood. Does that kind of make sense? That's kind of been my perspective
No,
from
and that's
outside.
that's you're pretty correct in that way. I think one of the things too is he was as you said, he was famous when he was
Right.
younger, a lot younger, but also normal things that, like, family teases. I have brothers, we grew up teasing each other, like, oh, look what, this and that. But then
Right.
when you're on stage and you're super famous, and it goes tenfold. You're under a
Right.
microscope, so you take it. My uncle was very sensitive.
That's
He
a
was an
good
empath.
point, because I
So
mean, me and my cousins make fun of, when we were kids, we make fun of each other like crazy. But if I was made fun of by whatever they would say about me then, and then have to go on stage, like magnify that if I'm a
it
sensitive
magnified
person.
that,
Yeah,
because
I
then,
get that. That
especially if
makes
you had
sense.
insecurities about it in
Hmm.
that way, and that's the thing. What a lot of people don't know as well is that when him growing up, he also heard it from certain fans, because we all go through that ugly phase, the teenage years and stuff
Hmm.
like that. But imagine going through that phase where you were that cute little Michael. Now all of a sudden you're going through this phase where you're not, in their standards, as cute. And so
Right.
you hear certain things from fans. It's funny, fans don't realize that you can hear them sometimes.
Hmm.
You could be 5 feet away, 10 feet away, and they're talking. You can hear them, but you hear. And I remember him telling us that he heard a couple of fans say, "Where's Michael?" And then one of them pointed him, and she goes, "Ew," and it's like that. To me, it hurt my feelings back then when I heard that story, and he told us that story. But that says a lot, because you have this standard of what people thought you looked like and what you were, and now all of a sudden you're growing and you're changing, your body's changing, and you don't look like that anymore. And so
Right.
I think, yes, he had a different childhood. I would say my uncle's, is eccentric, different, and I don't like the word normal, because I don't like to be normal either. Like, I think you have to stand out. Like, Michael Jordan wasn't normal. Michael Jordan was a
Right.
beast,
Right.
like literally he had a different mentality than the normal people did in that
Right.
way,
I
and
agree. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm someone that's never had a sip of alcohol in my life, or done drugs, or
yeah,
smoked, and people consider that weird by
weird.
normal
Yeah.
standards. But I don't want to be normal. So I feel you on that.
Yeah. And so, and I think society dictates what's normal, in that time period, because, normal 100 years before was different. Being overweight was a sign of being wealthy and being, having abundance.
Hmm.
Now it's a sign of unhealthiness, and it's being skinny and anorexic is, it's just weird, in that way. So
Right.
I don't like society telling me what's normal. And so I think with my uncle, the hardest thing was that he just grew up. He grew up on tour buses. He grew up just going through that lifestyle. He grew up with people that were older than him, like the Marvin Gayes and the Diana Rosses, being friends with them. So a kid being friends with an adult was nothing new to him, you know.
Right.
Like he was hanging out with Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, and Diana Ross, and those were his friends.
Right.
So you flip it around when he's older, he's like, "What's wrong with hanging out with kids? They're my friends." And I
Yep.
think that's different, because unless you've had that experience, and he's always said, unless you've walked in my shoes, you don't really, you know, try not to judge me in that way. And so, yeah, we had childhood, we had birthday parties, we had all of that. We had, best friends that we hung out with. He didn't really have that. And I think that was why he tried to rekindle his childhood. He tried to live vicariously through others. You know, sometimes it worked, sometimes it failed, because then, you know, as they got older, or their parents, you know, would then see him as a money opportunity, and then try and sue him, you know, and make false allegations. But he always was trying to rekindle his childhood, and it wasn't an act. You know, we had plenty of pie fights and water balloons and stink bombs and pranks with him, you know, that are great memories to me. And it wasn't like, okay, camera's off now, you know, now I'm going to be an adult. It was like, he was always like that. Like, he loved being a kid. And I do too. Like, I'm living that dream of trying to be a kid.
Look at me. I have people like,
I know,
Jeremy, you're in a kid's room. I'm like, I'm in heaven, man.
Grow up, Jeremy.
About,
you know why do you have kid stuff around and all that stuff? It's like, no, you don't tell me. You know, I feel good with what I have, and trust me, if I swung my room around, it's not as cool as yours, but I got my Batman figures and other stuff as well. So
that's awesome. So obviously, with everything that's happened over the last several years, with you and, you know, members of the family speaking out about a lot of the agenda, and how the family has been railroaded, and the name of Michael Jackson has been railroaded. Have you gotten, and you don't have to name names or anything, but have you seen, you know, different relationships that you had within the industry? Either people have distanced themselves from you, or have they privately said that they are proud of you, but they can't follow that? Like, because for me, as a pretty much irrelevant YouTuber in my eyes, I've heard from YouTubers that are bigger than me that will tell me, like, hey, I really do love what you say. I can't back you publicly because for whatever reason, and that's fine. They have a different business model. They have a different, you know, goal that they're trying to create. And I totally respect that. And I'll never name names for anybody that reaches out, but have you experienced that from your perspective, being part of, you know, one of, if not the most famous families, you know, of our generation?
Oh, 100%. And you're completely right. You hit it on the nail on the head. 2005, the trial, you know, that my uncle went through, there were publicists and agents that specifically told their clients to, you know, distance yourself. And I think that was the hardest time for my uncle, because he had been there for everyone else. You know, I can't name names, but he literally had been there, like, whether it was a phone call, whether, do you need anything, or I'm you know, I support you, I'm a big fan of this movie, and I want you to know that I'm here. That's how he was. And when that wasn't reciprocated in a way where it's like, I can't do this because my agent says it's bad for me, you know, that hurts. And it hurt it was a big blow for him in that way, because people that you would never expect did that to him. And it was a lonely time for him in that way. And I think that's kind of what this last year was for us as well in the beginning, because you couldn't publicly, you had a target on your back if you said something, if you defended him. It was like almost like Me Too said, oh, you're an enabler, or you're a victim shamer, or this or that. And so a lot of people that wanted to come out, and some of them came out early to defend him, they got shot down. Like, literally, you know, if it's a movie and warplane, they got shot down early. And it was almost like a warning sign, hey, you don't defend this guy, we control what the narrative is. And so a lot of people did, behind the scenes, say, I'm here, I believe your uncle, I believe you and your family. It's a shame of what they're doing. And a lot of people have continued to do that, you know, and you'd be surprised at the big names that have done that. Now, it's interesting because the rap industry is different. The hip hop industry, they don't care, you know, they've come out since the beginning and been like, hey, we support Mike. And, you know, that's a different, because they've always kept it, and I don't even say real, they don't care what the mainstream media says about them. You know, they're used to being the underdogs and used to the mainstream media lying about them. So it's Hollywood that has basically been the one that is like, oh shoot, you know, I've seen people that are huge Michael Jackson fans, but because they're on HBO and they have a hit series, they can't say a word. And there's a lot of those that were wearing his t-shirt, you know, saying he's my favorite artist, and now have a hit show on HBO and they can't say a word, you know, because HBO is the one that kind of
had the
Yeah, they backed Leaving Neverland. They purchased it and they backed it.
Do you think there's any internal like motivation from that perspective from HBO? Do you think there's anybody there? What do you think there's any type of reasoning behind HBO doing that, or more so just an opportunity to make money? Or do you think there was motivation to just continue to slander a person that's no longer here? Any insight on that?
Well, I know it was taken to other places. I heard after the fact, and everyone passed. And
Interesting.
I think that, and I think it was interesting with Leaving Neverland, because I think if Oprah didn't back it and didn't have that special behind it, it wouldn't have got a lot of the support that it got anyway, because people would have said, oh, I don't know. This is kind of weird, and why are they doing this now? But then Oprah did an hour. I didn't see it, so it was an hour, 2 hour special.
I haven't seen. I haven't seen the Neverland movie either. The documentary. I won't watch it. So.
I've watched segments of it. It honestly makes me want to take my shoe off and throw it at the TV screen.
Mm-hmm.
Just because I know every lie that they've said events that I physically were at that were lies, and I called them on it, and the director edited it out of the movie. So he's editing lies out of the movie, which is so dishonest to do. We're fact checking him, and then he's taking it out of the movie. The movie got shorter as the run got, basically, in that way. Wow. And so the English version is different than the American version, because we called him out on certain lies, and he took out those segments. So it's so dishonest in terms of how they're operating. But at the same time, when you have a juggernaut like HBO, don't forget HBO at that point, they had Game of Thrones coming out. So no one in their right mind of Hollywood wanted to disagree with them, trade wise. They were like, no, this is this is the hit that it's always been. We need them to be our friend. Right. And so that's why it was the perfect storm in that way. And I mean, karma, Game of Thrones, ended like it needed to end it in that way, because, so and that's why I keep saying karma, because it's like all these things that, stopped that were hard last year, it's coming to fruition. A lot of the people, they're getting found out, or they have a lot of skeletons in their closet that they kind of were using Michael to deflect in that way.
Yep. It's so interesting how that is actually happening as we speak. And yes, Game of Thrones season 8, trash, complete trash. And I was watching your channel, and I was trying, because you knew more than so I had to stop watching because I didn't want the spoilers. Yeah.
But then I heard you say, "Oh yeah, it's right. You were right on," and I was like, "Oh crap!" I didn't know what that right on meant, but I was like, okay, that's not good if he's like, verifying that that's the ending of something.
Yeah. It was so bad. I mean, I remember Mahler and I, were talking about it, because after, I think it was episode 3 was so bad, and then episode 4 happened, and then we decided, let's look at the spoilers, and we looked, and we were like, there's no way that this is how it ends. Yeah. And then we both agreed that, like, there's no way. And then it happened. It kept happening and we're like, holy crap, it's actually this bad. And the reality of witnessing it was actually even worse than reading it, because watching the execution of it, it was so incredible.
That's like the last Star Wars movie. Exactly the same thing.
Yes.
It's like you're praying that the rumors were wrong. And then you're like, no, it's not. And oh gosh.
Yep.
And I think
Star Wars is something we're going to talk about here.
We'll talk about Star Wars.
We'll talk about Star Wars here in just a few.
So I'm a big believer in karma in that way. I just am. I've lived my life, being the best person I could be, and believing that, if I'm a good person, somehow I'll be, I don't want to say I'll be protected in that way. People will have my back, and so far that's been the case. I've had a great support system, and people that have attacked me or lied about me, they've been found out to be the liars.
Well, I know I know that what will happen from being on with me is nothing compared to what you've dealt with, but you will get a few more of these little Twitter chihuahuas that'll be biting at your ankles after you're on.
Of course. So, I mean, that's everywhere. Every interview I do, and whatever, I just ask them just to look up the facts. Like, one side wants you to investigate. The other side doesn't want you. They want you to go, no, trust us. Mm-hmm. And I've never been a trust us person. I've been like, no, go ahead. Do all the research you want to do, and then come to your own conclusion.
Yep, exactly. Now, the other thing I was going to touch on a little bit here was Oprah. Like, what's the deal there? And I'm not an Oprah fan, by the way. I don't know what her involvement is with the you know, the Jackson family. I don't know how much of that you can talk about, but is there more to that? You know, because you mentioned the
She,
special. Was there like a motivation behind that with her special, or do you know, or anything you can add to that?
you know, Oprah's a hard one, and I'm going to tell you completely what I think in terms of that, because you know, Oprah was having success in America, and then my uncle chose her to be, you know, when he came back to do interviews again, he chose her to be the person to interview him and put her on the international map. I think the interview was 93 million people watched it. It was the biggest interview at that point. I think it still is the biggest interview of all time in terms of that. So he made her an international star in that way. Um, I I have a lot of thoughts about Oprah because, you know, I'm the person that I don't forget who helped me out and all that stuff. And even if I have questions or whatever, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and give them an equal opportunity to comment or to, you know, to answer questions in that way. Um, when Oprah, when my uncle's trial in 2005, Oprah did a couple of specials and a couple of shows on pedophilia. And so she's always been an active participant, kind of almost jabbing him in the back, you know, on each. And she did her specials or her shows actually tainted the jury pool. So it affected his trial in that way. So she's never, you know, people have said, oh, she's an ally or whatever. Not to us, not to our family. She's never been an ally.
Wow.
And a lot of our family had a problem because she came back, you know, saying when Michael died, she came back to my grandma and the kids saying, you know, Michael was misunderstood and I want people to see the real Michael and all that stuff. And I, you know, even I was wrong about Michael. And I heard a lot of these words from her own mouth as she was telling my grandma this to sell her on an idea of doing it. Because my grandma could have literally went anywhere with this interview with the kids. Like it was the hottest interview at the time. And of course they gave it to Oprah, you know, because they thought that she was really sincere. And then here we go with Leaving Neverland. And she watches it on her birthday on David Geffen's boat, you know. And I really believe that it was almost like a plan. Like, okay, let's get Michael, you know, okay, well, this is what I'm going to need. I'm going to need, you know, the whole audience members to be child sex victims, because that way, you know, it's more effective. And and I don't want anyone from the family there or anyone else that has a contradictory vote or opinion, because we really have to get behind this. And so it's just, the only reason I have to be careful, because I have a lot of friends, unfortunately, that still worship Oprah, you know, and think she's like the best thing since sliced bread. I see through that. And I know my family does as well. I mean, she was supposed to be a friend of Janet, you know, she claimed she was Janet's friend and all this stuff. It's like, that's your friend. That's what you do to your friend. You don't even give them the opportunity to respond or to talk about it ahead of time. You know, if that was my friend, I'd be like, you know, let me talk to you and see what the situation is, because these two guys and their families are saying one thing. I want the inside, what's going on. But she didn't do that. She hid it. She was part of the character assassination attempt of Michael's legacy.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of Oprah. I would love to hear you talk to Anna, that Star Wars girl, about Oprah, because she will rant and rant about Oprah, and she will become your best friend if you share some of this with her. Because
I will talk to her. I mean, it's so frustrating though, because I see, and I know it's frustrating for you when you see certain things too. People that worship people or love people, like, oh no, not Oprah. Ellen's getting it now. You know, it's like people are waking up and seeing, no, that's one persona, but then how they act behind the scenes is another persona. And and I should say allegedly or whatever, just to protect myself, but just in terms of like what, you know, how they are behind the scenes in that way. You realize,
I mean, mentioning one right now, I'm going to say it. I'm not asking you to touch on this subject, but Justin Timberlake apologized to Janet Jackson. Mister, I want to get on social media right now and talk about his Black Lives Matter stuff, but you had no problem letting Janet take the full blame for the Super Bowl. Justin publicly apologized to Janet. Just wanted to
not
say
only that,
quick, so.
Justin knows Wade. Justin got betrayed by Wade. I expected in Leaving Neverland, you know, Wade was one of Justin's best friends. So Justin hired Wade to choreograph their tour, you know, and convinced the other guys to do that. So Wade backstabbed Justin, you know, so that I expected him, but of course, probably his agent or his publicist like, no,
Yep.
don't touch it, you know, and he
Yep.
listened in that way. But I was hoping that he'd come forward and go, no, I know Wade, I know what he's capable of, and you know, he's always been that kind of character. He's always been someone that leapfrogs, you know, to the next lily pad or whatever. In terms
Yeah.
of he always wants to get ahead, and he doesn't care who he crosses to get ahead, and that's why he burnt his bridges in the dance community, because he made such a mess there that no one wants to hire him again.
Imagine being a dancer and getting to work with Michael and Justin and Britney Spears and ruining all of this. What a loser, man. Wow.
It's just, yeah, it's unfortunate. And but you know, he had a certain, like, I mean, if you know Wade and you see him, and he was very confident, but he outside a certain arrogance to him in that way. And I think that he was always looking for the next thing and looking for the next big score in that way. And he was supposed to do the Cirque du Soleil, the Michael Jackson. In his eyes, he was up for the running for it. And when I say he was supposed to, he thought he was supposed to be the person to direct it and be the head person on it. So he was vying for that position. So back then he was pro Michael. He was doing tributes and all that stuff. It was the estate that basically said, no, we're going to go with someone else. We're going to go with Jamie King, who we think is more experienced, blah, 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 blah. And I think he felt like, almost like a movie where you feel betrayed. Like, no, I'm supposed to be the one to do this. And soon after, he starts writing his book about being molested by Michael Jackson. So
it's something like I noticed. Yeah, it's something I see in Hollywood, and just speaking on how you talked about Oprah is kind of what led me to the Justin Timberlake thing, because it's just like, I know for a fact Justin Timberlake worshipped Michael Jackson in terms of when he was a kid. He emulated Michael Jackson. He tried his 100%. Best to be, and the fact that he got to be on stage with Janet Jackson, and he shared the stage with Michael at one point too for that reunion, and the fact that he just, you know, kind of just moved on from that whole incident, and it was almost like at that point in time he was a big star, Timberlake was, but he still needed to continue to grow. It was almost like he was just scared, so he was just willing to just, you know, not say anything and let Janet take all of the blame. And now he's Mr. Respect Black People, Respect Women bullshit on Twitter, and it's like, you don't believe. And I'm a big Timberlake fan. I've told you this on the phone.
I am too.
I think he's fantastic. I think he's amazingly talented, but you know, when you want to get out there and virtue signal, man, it's real easy to call you out on your crap. So,
and that's been the hardest thing with this whole scenario in terms of the last year or so, has been being a big fan of someone and being really extremely disappointed. And I've burnt so many bridges in Hollywood, you know, as someone that is a director and wants to, you know, that's my livelihood in the coming the future. I've literally had matches and just lit everything on fire. Like, you know, I mean, you know, I've called out the biggest publications. I called out Sundance. You know, so it's like, I've just, you know, I've called out certain celebrities that I'll never probably ever work with, or, you know, now again, that I liked and respected, you know, and it's just like, I'm like, oh, there goes. But the truth, and I hate the word my truth, the truth is more important to me. And I fight for the truth.
Thank you.
Not my truth, the truth. And so I will die on a hill that is the truth, as opposed to, you know, I'm not in that Hollywood, I need acceptance phase of it, you know. And maybe because I grew up in it and grew up, you know, that I don't need that. I don't need to feel accepted by Hollywood.
Well, that's kind of how it's been with me, where, you know, when I first created Geeks and Gamers, you know, I was very much trying to be politically correct in terms of riding the fence, you know, not talking about my politics, not trying to upset people. But I've always been a very blunt person in real life. And you know, we went nowhere with me trying to ride the fence. And then finally I decided, okay, there's still people mad at me, even with me trying to ride the fence. So I might as well just speak my mind. And if I'm going to make people mad, I might as well make people mad being honest with myself. So of course, you know, admitting I'm a Trump supporter is the, you know, the worst thing you can do to some people, just because I guess that just makes them lose sleep at night. And, you know, I've always said, I don't have a problem with your political opinions. The problem is do you have a problem with mine? Because I don't care if you disagree with me. You can disagree with me all day long. It doesn't hurt my feelings. It doesn't bother me. It's the question is can other people deal with mine? Because I can deal with theirs. And, you know, you find out real quick, you know, and I had people, you know, that stabbed me in the back that were on my team, all because
Yeah.
they knew privately I was a Trump supporter, but
Mhm.
publicly, once I publicly made that statement, and then the circles they ran in were always like, wait a minute, you worked with a Trump supporter? How could you do that? And so they had to build this kind of like boogeyman mentality around me just so they could say, well, I knew all along he was like this. It's like what, you know? And
Yeah.
it's just really strange how quickly people, you know, will have public social pressure to, you know, distance themselves from someone that they truly don't have any issues with. And
Yeah. You said it right though. It's public pressure,
yeah,
and we witnessed that a lot with Leaving Neverland. It was like there was no other narrative. It was like, oh, you have to believe that Leaving Neverland is what it is. And they had a 2-week build up in terms of, because it was premiered at Sundance. So all the major trades were like, oh, this is devastating, cancel Michael now, and all that, before anyone had even seen it. So they already had brainwashed the public into thinking this is, you know, he's over with.
yeah,
You know, it wasn't until and they wouldn't let our family see it either. So it was like we had no defense of it at that point. And so it wasn't until we actually physically saw it that we're like, wait a minute, that's not right. That's not true. This is a complete lie. And then we find out about the train station not being there. We find out Wade, you know, actually went to the Grand Canyon with his family, and he lies and said that he was over at Neverland. And, you know, and this is, he's told 4 different stories, 2 in deposition, 1 at Leaving Neverland, and 1, you know, in an interview. So these are people that can't even keep their stories straight, you know, and don't care because the media is bending over backwards to protect them in that way. You know, I mean, there was one, and I knew I got confirmation when one of the people closest to Michael, this lady Grace, who was like, they called her the nanny, but she was really like a surrogate mother / nanny in a way for the kids and stuff like that. She was explaining that when the 2005 trial had happened, you know, Wade was the first defense witness for Michael. You know, if you're building a case, you know, and you're Tom Mesereau and you're Michael Jackson, why would you put someone that you molested 100 times to be your first witness, the most important witness, and get grilled where any point he could say, he could break down and go, you're right, you know, I was molested, and
exactly.
Michael's career's over in that way.
Yeah,
you know?
done.
Not only that, Wade had the audacity to want to get married at Neverland. You know, during the trial, he asked to get married at Neverland. So if you were molested at a place that you were considered 100 times, you got molested there. He says hundreds of times. He was only at Neverland 4 times or 5, you know, according to them, by himself. Why would you want to get married at the place that you supposedly got molested? Like, those are logical questions that no one, they just brush through. We've said those things on Twitter, but, you know, the media, and I know the media follows me because I see the following list. So I know they're following. I know they're seeing it. They're just not.
Oh yeah, they don't want to talk about it. No.
And I had one actual media newspaper be at least completely honest with me and say, you know, the editor and the higher ups, they don't want anything pro Michael. And so at least they were very champion. They were trying to get an interview with us and all that stuff. And then they came back and said, and the same thing with Good Morning. I just said almost. I mean, I said almost the whole word. Good Morning America. I might as well just say it now. Me and Brandy were supposed to do an interview on that for Leaving Neverland. And it was so frustrating because that day it got canceled, and we found out that someone higher up basically canceled it. And we mentioned her earlier, but it's like someone from that camp. So when you're dealing just not even with the truth, but you're just dealing with people trying to suppress the truth, that's frustrating. And I know, you know, you guys, your channel talks about it all the time in terms of that when it comes to movies, and they want to spin this narrative. So they'll say, oh no, it's not as bad, or no, this is this, or they really, you see it in Hollywood all the time in that way. And once you wake up to it, it's hard to not wake up to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one thing, like when I had Cameron on the show, and he works in Hollywood, and he's a Muslim, and he's not a white dude. And, you know, a lot of the things that, and I just say it from my perspective, from what I see from looking at it and taking a common sense look at it. And then I have people like Cameron that, you know, tell me like, yeah, you're pretty much spot on. And then, you know, yourself. And again, you watched my channel. It's funny because I was talking to Andy Signor and he had mentioned you,
Yeah.
and he was like, yeah, he says, Taj says you're a great guy. Or he's like, you know, Taj is a big fan. I'm like, Taj who? He goes, Taj Jackson, Michael's nephew. I'm like, how the hell does Taj Jackson, Michael's nephew, know who I am? And then I went to like, and then I messaged you, but I'd seen you had messaged me like
I'd messaged you way
months
earlier.
in advance.
Yeah.
And I was like,
Yeah.
what the hell is going on? And that's how that led to it, you know. And I thought that was so funny. But yeah, but you had watched me for months, just kind of like how Uche, you know, Uche Waneri, who's former Jacksonville Jaguars, and Uche does not agree with me politically at all.
Yeah.
And he has his own, you know, opinions socially. We argue all the time behind the scenes, but Uche watched me for almost a year before he reached out to me, because he's like, I studied you. I wanted to make sure, you know, you were, you know, the up and up. Because like when I first started watching you, he's like, I was like, he told me, he said, I thought to myself, that guy's probably a Trump supporter. and I was, and still am. But, you know, Uche doesn't define me off that, even though he doesn't agree with that. You know, he didn't define me off that. He defined me off of, you know, the way I approach things and the way I looked at things. And so hearing that people from the industry, you know, do, and I've mentioned this before on my channel, and my critics want to say that it's not true, and that's perfectly fine. It's my truth. But my critics will say like, oh, he doesn't, I have people at Lucasfilm that give me information. There are people in the industry that talk to me. There are big time YouTubers that talk to me that don't want me to reveal who they are. And I will never reveal anybody if they ask me not to. But to hear that there are people like yourself and Cameron and Uche and people that just have, you know, experience in these industries that will talk to me and, you know, confirm a lot of the things that I say and correct me if I'm wrong on other things like that. Like that's good.
Same,
you know, it's good for me, you know.
And same for me. Like, I don't know everything. And I've always said, like, I'm open to learn. I've publicly apologized on social media before. You know, I have no qualms about, you know, being the better person in that way. It was some I forgot which artist it was. There, people are gonna beat me up over it, but you know, it was like I saw this trending like so is the new king of pop, you know, and it pissed me off, you know, because I hate that they are trying to get that title away. But then and then so I started
what Chris Brown was it?
No, it wasn't Chris Brown.
They tried to give it Chris Brown.
It was someone from the UK in that way. I
don't know any current musicians really. So
I got really defensive, and I was, you know, I went into nice attack mode, because I have attack mode and nice attack mode. I went to nice attack mode, and then some of the fans of him basically said, "Hey, look, he's a big supporter of your uncle. He loves your uncle and whatever." That wasn't him that said that. That was a magazine that said that. He had nothing to do with that. And I was like, "You're right. He didn't say that. And why am I attacking him and his fandom?" And so I publicly apologized to him, and then I went and researched him, and he had lost his mom just like I had, and all that stuff, and I felt really bad. And I was like, and his music was good, you know, it's good music, and we had something in common, and I publicly apologized, and I'm happy I did that, because, you know, I go overboard sometimes as well, just being, you know, in attack, the attack dog now, and I don't mean to be. It's just, you know, certain things trigger me in that way, and I forget that the media is the one that's trying to replace Michael, not, you know, the artist in certain ways.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, they would love to just, you know, have Michael not be prominent in people's minds anymore, which is absolutely ridiculous to me.
They took the Simpson episode off. That's the only episode in there. I don't even know how. I mean, I stopped watching Simpsons long ago, but even so, a lot of people did. But even so, it's like, out of their whole history of all the people that have had scandals or whatever, Michael Jackson's the one that you take out of your whole catalog in that way. And, you know, in that way. And same with statues. They've taken statues away and stuff like that. And before Leaving Neverland even came out, they were doing this crap and taking them off of rotations of playlists and stuff like that. And we've still found out certain companies don't, you know, put them in a lot of their rotation and stuff, like big companies. So it's a big conspiracy behind the scenes aspect, but they're learning that people don't care, and people are still bumping. He had the best year that he's had in years, you know,
really?
in terms of that. Yes.
Nice.
And so they're and Hollywood, all Hollywood and the music industry care about is numbers. So if they see an upswing, they're like, oh, maybe we should play him now.
Yeah.
You know. And that's what happened. It was like all those radio stations that stopped playing them, people went streaming and they streamed them more. And so it's like, okay, maybe we need to play them again. And so they started slowly. And I don't call them out when they come back. You know, I really don't. I'm not that vindictive. Like, oh, now you're back and whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know, but they are. I'm not. I would say 90% of them are back in terms of he's back in rotation and stuff like that.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear.
So.
It's why the media, it's why the mainstream media doesn't like, you know, YouTubers. It's why they're constantly trying to, like, you know, obviously PewDiePie is the biggest individual creator on the platform. So anytime if they can make him look bad, by default, they're making all YouTubers.
They're making
look
all
bad.
of he represents YouTube
and I love PewDiePie. I think he's fantastic. But they can't stand it to have independent creators that don't follow that nonsensical narrative. Now, let's shift a little bit more into my world of the identity politics driven nonsense in Hollywood, and specifically tell everyone how you found this channel. I'll let you tell the story about that one.
I found this channel. I had watched The Last Jedi, and I'll never forget it. I came out of the theater and I was hurt. I was almost like I felt betrayed in a way, and not in a good way in terms of I remember turning to BG and turning to my brother TJ and Terrell. No, it was Terrell. Sorry. It was BG and my brother Terrell. Terrell's like, he doesn't care. Like, he's very neutral, you know. BG's someone that cares about film. And and so I wanted two opinions, and Terrell solidified. He goes, that wasn't good at all. And he was almost as upset as I was in a way. And BG was just, he didn't even want to talk about it. He walked out of the theater and literally, and BG is Michael's youngest son. He literally walked out of the theater and like, he didn't want to talk to anyone. Like he had his opinion and he didn't want it to be like, you know, but he also I think it rubbed him completely the wrong way. Just like it did me, but you know, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. One of the reasons that I wanted to be a director, you know, George Lucas to me is one of the pioneers in terms of, I just think he's incredible. Yep. And I think that he becomes a scapegoat for a lot of this crap that's going on, you know, and I think he's just a genius in himself. Yep. And so just to be able to create that world and those characters is beyond anything I can comprehend right now in that way. And I just felt like, what bothers me more than anything is when someone does something just because they can, as opposed to they should. And Rian Johnson he made a movie like, well, you think we're going here, we're going to go here. And you think we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And F you if you've been waiting 30 years for what Luke Skywalker can do, because he's not going to do anything. And it just felt like you wanted to shock people as opposed to giving the fans what they want. And I'm a big component of giving the people what they want. I mean, I see Sonic, you know, over there. Sonic once that horrendous trailer first came out and everyone complained, they had two choices: roll with it and say, no, this is where we're going, you know, be arrogant, or say, we got you, we heard you, we're changing it. Yep. And they chose the right choice and they got rewarded for it. Yep. And I was there opening night on Sonic because I said, this is you listen to the fans, you're going to get rewarded. And I saw it, I think 2 or 3 times because of that. And I loved it anyway, but that's the reason why you do things like that. And I think Star Wars was different. It was like, okay, we're going to this is not your parents' Star Wars. This is our Star Wars now. And we're going to change it. We're going to do all this stuff. And I understand the Harrison Ford thing, you know. I mean, I don't know how much spoilers.
All of it.
I understand that Harrison Ford had to die because he wanted out, you know, like I felt lucky to get another movie with Harrison for Han Solo because Harrison Ford never even wanted to go back to Star Wars. So the fact is that we got one out of him is like, okay, wow, you know. But Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker is different. He bleeds Luke Skywalker, you know. He's the whole journey of my childhood, Luke Skywalker. And to have him on the sidelines so that you can promote someone else. It's like, I believe, make that person strong, but don't weaken the other person to make that person look stronger.
Right.
I'm a big component of that. They've done that to my uncle all the time. They've tried to bring him down to bring someone else up.
Yep.
Make that person rise to the occasion, or make that person better in terms of like fight for it, but don't try and drag my uncle down so that that person looks better. And they did that with Star Wars, making Rey, giving her all these powers and stuff like that. If she earned it, I would be 100% behind it in that way. But I think the slap on the face was just that Luke basically he was on the sidelines, and it was probably that and just the characters. Like when you start throwing in characters just because like we need this guy, we need this kind of demographic and all that. I see it because of music. It's like, oh, we need this kind of song to hit this person. We need this song, we need to throw this thing in for this kind of demographic. It's like calculate. It's business. It's a business mindset. And that's, Lucas was never about business. Lucas was about storytelling and the world. And that's when I learned. And BG warned me. He's like, about Disney Star Wars. Like he warned me. He's like, Disney's gonna ruin Star Wars. And I'm like, no, what are you talking about? Disney's great. I was in that naive.
Same here. I was too.
and I saw it. I saw the numbers. I saw what they were doing. It's like, oh, we need this kind of character. Or, demographics say that this will play out, and we have to have Raylo, and we have to have all this stuff. It's just like it was laughable in all sense. And I know I'm rambling, but
that's all right.
You were so authentic, and you basically verified everything I was thinking. But while the mainstream media was shoving it down our throats, that, Rotten Tomatoes of, oh, this is incredible. Mm-hmm. Just like they did with Leaving Neverland, giving it, 98, 100, and all those ridiculous. And I'm like, okay, I'm a Star Wars fan. And that is not even close to what I would give it. I would give it in the 30s or 40s, and that's being nice, and I was a Rian Johnson fan. I saw Brick, I saw Looper, I had seen all, and his Breaking Bad episodes. So it wasn't like I came hating Rian Johnson or whatever.
Right.
I have to call out what's not good. That's just me in terms of that. And I understand things are made not for everyone in that way, but you have to respect the material. You have to respect the fandom. I always believe that,
absolutely.
Do your own Star Wars or whatever, but respect the fandom and give them what they want. We wanted to see Luke kick butt. We wanted to see him, how strong and how powerful he truly was. And instead you made this guy basically, Yoda 2.0, and I'm talking about the Return of the Jedi-ish, mm-hmm. Empire Strikes Back Yoda, where basically he's just training someone.
Yeah, I mean, you said it best. He was on the sidelines is essentially what it was. I remember there's the quote from Michael Arndt, who was the original script writer for The Force Awakens, and he talked about how in the beginning he was writing Luke, but they had a problem with Luke taking too much attention away from the main characters. I'm like, it's Luke Skywalker in a Star Wars movie. Of course he's going to take the attention away. Like, of course. That's
what bothered me, though. That's exactly what you just said. Like, it's his journey. Like, keep his journey going, and then start your own trilogy or whatever. But let's finish off with Luke, because it really is the Skywalker story. And don't try and, I mean, we saw the agenda coming from a mile away once we saw it in terms of what they were trying to push, and, the Force is female and all this stuff and everything like that. And I don't mind if it's strong female character. I don't even mind if it's lead female characters, if it's earned. And it just like, I don't like, and I'll probably get in trouble for this, when it's like, minorities that are thrown into lead characters just because it's like, it's the Hollywood thing to do now. It's like, no, make a strong Black or Latin or whoever character that everyone can root for. Don't give us pity points in a way.
That's been my entire argument the whole time. It's not about having, I don't have and again, the fact that I even have to make the claim that I don't have a problem with, non-white dude characters is ridiculous. My problem is that they are used as circus animals, is how Hollywood uses non-white dudes. They're like, we just need one. We just need one to throw in the movie. And they're not worried about actually writing. They're not actually worried about developing. They're not actually worried about making these characters interesting so
which
that
is
the
what
audience
Finn,
will
yeah.
resonate with them, you know?
No one, I mean, I was excited for Finn and then realized Finn was just basically had nothing to do, and I'll probably get in trouble for that, but he didn't. He like literally, if you took him out of the equation of some of the Star Wars movies, it's like it still moves the same way.
Yeah.
In that way, and that should never be the case. And that bothered me because when he came on the scene, I was like, oh, this is going to be cool, especially when there was hints that he could be force sensitive and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's really cool, you know. But of course, you know, there's other, I guess, agendas in that way. But it's just, yeah, it bothers me.
And Hollywood right now, the entertainment industry, it's overrun with identity politics, and it's driving me crazy. It's driving all fans crazy right now. And I think you kind of talked about it with the music industry and how it's this like manufactured thing about how we have to get this. And at the end of the day, like, look at me growing up, I was just a white kid. And Michael Jackson was my hero because he was amazing. It had nothing to do with I need to see a white guy, you know, or what. It's like I've talked about those on stream before with like Michael Jordan. I was a Michael Jordan fan. Larry Bird was there. Larry Bird was great, but I didn't never say I have to pull for Larry Bird because I need to have a strong white male. I don't care about that. I loved Michael Jordan. I loved the way he played the game. And I loved Michael Jackson, and he was cool. Nobody was cooler than Michael Jackson with the zipper jacket and bad.
It was a cool time. It was a surreal time back then. But yeah, I mean, and that was the thing. It's like race became a problem in Hollywood. It always has been a problem, but you know, they're not doing it for their best. What's the word? They don't mean it in terms of Hollywood. They're not doing it to do it.
It's not authentic at all.
No, it's not authentic at all. And I think people are seeing that. They're seeing that it's basically we have to cover our bases by, as you said, by throwing this person in or throwing this race in or this sex in and all that stuff. And it's not authentic. And I believe in authenticity because I think people see through it and they see it as like, oh, they're just throwing us a bone in that way. And the saddest thing is that when they do that anyway, it's not enough ever, you know, and that because people see it's not authentic. And so it's like, okay, that's not even enough. You got to go even further in that way. And so when it's authentic, I loved, and I'll probably get my black card thrown away, but Black Panther, when in Civil War, when he hit the scene, I had never read a Black Panther comic. I was just like, dude, this guy is dope, you know, and everything like that. And it was an exciting experience for me because I was like, there's a character, because I grew up having to be either, you know, a black Batman or, you know, or whatever. Like there was no characters that I could be. My favorite character was Flash, you know, and the Hulk in both just different, you know, DC and Marvel. And there was no like representation for me in that way. And I didn't even know about Black Panther, but it was like when I saw him on the scene, I was like, and in full honesty, you know, the movie wasn't like, I didn't like it that much, you know, in that way, as much as it got. I know how important it was for certain people, but for me, I'm still like, I like the Russo brothers stuff, like Civil War and all that stuff. And not saying Ryan Coogler is not an incredible director, because I've seen a lot of his movies and I like a lot of them. It's just for that, like there was, I don't know, Infinity War and Endgame and Civil War. It's just, there's something about those movies. And
I agree.
You know, just there's a lot of magic behind them.
Yeah. Well, you said it best. I mean, like with Black Panther, when he did come out of nowhere in Civil War, I mean, it was awesome and he was interesting and you know, it was done for the right reasons. And even as much as I complain about the media hysteria around the movie Black Panther, the movie itself was fine. Like the movie didn't have this, you know, identity politics driven feel to it. The reaction to it by the media was totally that, but you can't fault the movie for how the media treated the movie, as long as the movie itself didn't have it. And that's done right. And there's nothing wrong with having, you know, different dynamics, different demographics for people that they feel that they can relate to. There's nothing wrong with that, but as long as it's done for the right reasons and not the wrong reasons. Everything that's been done with Star Wars has been done for the wrong reasons. You did nothing to further, you know, little girls or people of color being interested in Star Wars, because Finn is not a good character. I like John Boyega. Finn's not a good character.
I like him too. I really like him. He's not a good character. And he even, I honestly believe in his heart of heart, he believes it wasn't a good character, that they didn't know what it was in that way. And so yeah, you're right. They did nothing with the character. So at the end of the day, it was just a token, a
Yep.
token character
Yep.
in that. And so the problem I had with Black Panther was just the I see the agenda in Hollywood and the hype machine, and being told something's great, I would have rather just had my opinion for myself and then been like this, because I've seen it again recently and I see the power and the magic behind it. But it was like it was almost like you couldn't have another opinion. And so I naturally, when that happens and it's like, oh, this movie's, changing everything, it's like, then I kind of push back, just me in general, because I just have that, I don't want to say that anti-media, but anti-media hype. I do with every movie that not, it's just like, don't tell me what is great. I'll determine what I like in that way.
Right.
And then it takes me a couple of years to kind of been like, okay, let me watch the movie again. And Black Panther is a great movie. It really is. And it deserves what it got in that way. But when I saw it originally, I was like, okay, that was a little overhyped. That's how I thought in that way. But that's because it was overhyped. There's no movie that could have, let I guess it, I don't know, lived up to that expectation.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good point. So now, when do you think that do you think we're ever going to see this dial back with all of this nonsense with identity politics? I've always said, I think the election from 2016 has a lot to do with this. There's this, insanity with Hollywood. And then obviously we're heading to November. And I don't think that solely on that, but I think that plays a big part into it. But do you see this slowing down? Do you see it continuing to get worse based on your experience and seeing how Hollywood has operated over the last several decades?
Well, one of the things that is always hard is that the fact is that, as a screenwriter, they always tell you to write what you know. And until there's more different cultures in the screenwriting rooms, writing different stories, it starts there, because that's where you get your tokenism. It's like, oh, we have to throw in this kind of character as whatever. If it's, just like for me, I think of it the opposite way. Like I look at it through a black person's eyes. It's like throwing in a different nationality. It's like, okay, I need this just because, I don't want it to be just a quote unquote black movie now, So it's like, I think until you have that synergy where it's like all these different people, in a room or these different experiences, which is starting to happen. We're starting to learn more about each other. I'm keeping it away from political because I feel like that's a different topic for me in that way, in terms of Hollywood, even though they're intertwined as much as they can be. I mean, right. Hollywood is definitely into the political, arena and trying to sway it one way, but I think that in terms of bridging that gap, we can't let that, affect us in that way. Entertainment is just entertainment in that way. And I don't really like movies that have a political bias towards them at all. Right. I've never liked those kind of movies. I like movies that have a moral bias towards them in terms of like morality and you learn something, but I'm not someone that really likes political movies in terms of like, oh, think this way or think that way. Just be a good person is kind of the way I look at it. And so,
I think that's normal for like most
that's
people.
A normal, and I think that's, and until
as much as you don't like to be normal, I think you're normal when it comes to that, Taj.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. But I think that's the thing that you just have to, I think it is changing though. I really do. I think people have realized, they follow what is hot at the time. Like Sonic changed a lot because they saw that people rewarded a movie company for making that, Paramount for making that decision to go back and change everything. Right. Literally. They're like, that could have failed. And if that would have failed, I guarantee you that would have never happened again. Like, would have been like, but because of that, now they have a blueprint of like, we can be like Sonic and we can be someone that gives the fans what they want in that way. So as long as there's those kind of things, I think Last Jedi and all those movies did the opposite. They taught people, no, it wasn't a good movie. I don't care what you say or whatever. It wasn't maybe it was a good movie if it wasn't a Star Wars movie, but it wasn't a good movie. I don't even think that. I just think it wasn't it didn't earn the name Star Wars, and it shouldn't have had the name Star Wars on it. Yep. I'm watching the Clone Wars right now, and because of recommendations from my cousins and from you in general, season 4, so don't spoil anything. And that's why
No
I have to jump
spoilers.
off of sometimes of your channel, because, you know, whenever you talk about certain things, I'm like, oh, I can't listen and all that stuff. But, you know, I'm loving it. That's like the magic of what Star Wars is. And Mandalorian, you know, is has that vibe as well, in terms of you're starting to get little hints of that. Like, this is the Star Wars that should be, in terms of, or at least this is someone that really cares about Star Wars. That's all I care about. Like, I will let someone make bad decisions if they really cared about it. I feel like Rian Johnson, and I hate to say that, I just feel like he didn't care about it. I felt like he cared about changing it up and switching it up and shaking it up. And if he really cared about Star Wars, he would have understood why that was a bad decision to do half the things he did in that way.
I agree. I mean, like with Colin Trevorrow, who's the director of Jurassic World, and then he was the writer for the second one. I didn't really care for either one of those movies, but I really didn't like the second one. But Colin Trevorrow acknowledges the criticisms, and he said we'll try to do better, and so he cares about it. He didn't do a good job, but at least he cared, you know. So like you said, I'll deal with mistakes if people are passionate and are trying. But Rian
you
Johnson,
realize, okay, look, they're human, they made the mistake, but they're trying to get better. But when you have an arrogance of like, no, you were just a fanboy, or you're, you know, and we deal with it in our community with the Michael Jackson community. It's just like you're labeled a fan, an obsessive fan, or a mob or whatever, just because you have a different opinion, because, you know, in that way, and they try and diminish you.
Right.
And what I'm noticing is that the power is coming back to the people in that way. And with Rotten Tomatoes, when Leaving Neverland came out, they didn't even allow the audience score. So basically, it was just all media, and it was all like.
I remember
and,
that.
And I called them out, and I didn't even know. And someone said something, and I'm like, wait a minute, let me look. And I was like, wait a minute, you know, why is there no audience score? This is real. Why am I looking at? And every other movie has an audience score, and this one doesn't have an audience score. And it was like, it wasn't until, and what I realized is because of the Emmys. Basically, they hid the score.
Looking at it right now, it's a 98% critic score, 24% audience score.
24%. And it's like the Dave Chappelle thing, you know, like that. It was, you know, it's exactly that opposite in that way, in terms of, you know, when they have an agenda and are trying to push it on you, they're trying to tell you what is hip or what is good or what is, you know, offensive in that way. And you let the audience decide that.
Yeah, you're right. You're 100% right about that, because this right here, and I wish I would have thought about this before we recorded, but it's like this right here puts it in clear perspective. 98%, you know, a critic score, mainstream driven. They have their agenda. They have their narrative. They're not worried about anything other than this says what we want it to say from a narrative driven standpoint. And the fans speak out and trash it because the fans see right through it. And that just shows you that discrepancy between the fans and the media. And we see this with movies like The Last Jedi. We see it with movies like Ghostbusters 2016 and, you know, Terminator Dark Fate. And you know, it's like the media is so out of touch with the fans. And Leaving Neverland, that puts it in perspective right there, big time.
I know some media people, and I think the problem is that they're not high enough to make a difference in that way. And even when they try and shake it up, and they're like, no, I have a different opinion, it's their boss or whatever that's like, no, we're running with this, we're going with this story. I mean, even when Leaving Neverland came out, there were some articles that really easily debunked it that were supposed to come out, and HBO basically made a call to one of these big publications, because they all know each other, and basically said, you're not allowed to run this, you know. And the person, they honored it in that way. And so his second follow-up article, his first one got a bunch of numbers and all that stuff, but the second one never even got, it couldn't find a home, because and I think that when you suppress information, that's dangerous in that way. But
absolutely,
you know, with that, what was the score? 98 or
98 critic score and a 24% fan.
And the
score.
fans are really good at that, because they, you know, it was almost like there's talking points in there. And when we would look at the Twitter feed or look at whatever, and they would use the exact same wording, it's almost like they were sent a piece of paper that said, call it this, call it that, call it this. And people just cut and pasted it. And I forgot which fan it was that found that and saw all these people, these these reviewers using the exact same wording. And so that proves that it was just an agenda.
Yep, absolutely. It's absolutely ridiculous, man. These people are something else. But that right there, that is, I'm probably going to do a solo video just on that alone, because yeah, I mean, I remembered it, but it's just, yeah, that really does kind of circle us back around to where essentially my same problems with the mainstream media and how they're handling a lot of these entertainment properties. It circles back around to what you've been fighting with, you know, Michael and his name and your entire family, and this weird Hollywood bubble that exists. And there is a bubble out there, and if you step outside of that bubble, you know, that you are, you know, you're going to be trashed. I mean, I don't know if you
Enemy
saw,
number one.
yeah, I don't know if you saw my videos over on Sports Wars about Jonathan Isaac, who was the Orlando Magic player. He was the only, or the first NBA player that stood for the national anthem and didn't wear a Black Lives Matter shirt. And he's a black guy, and he's a minister, and he goes and does outreach work, and he's a really, really respectable guy. But because he stood for the national anthem and he didn't line up with the narrative, the media starts trashing him, and then the Twitter mob starts trashing him, and then the very next day, unfortunately, he suffers an ACL injury and he's out for the season. People on Twitter start trashing the guy, and then an ESPN guy by the name of Dan Levitard, pretty prominent show on ESPN, puts this poll out on Twitter, and he's like, "Is it funny that the guy that stood for the national anthem blew out his knee?" And it's like, wow. What kind of it's so
what kind of
weird
world do we live in?
Yeah, like Black Lives Matter, Black voices matter, until one of them has an opinion that you don't like, and then suddenly it's almost like none of that actually matters, because anybody go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, because you just said that about Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. Like, that was one of the frustration, there's that movie when They See Us and all that stuff, and it's about the Central Park Five and being falsely accused of something. And it's like, the media got behind that, and it's like, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, so it's okay for that because it was, it's about Black people that were falsely accused, but you won't look at Leaving Neverland that same way and look at and give my uncle the benefit of the doubt.
Exactly.
It's like that's where I've always said, I hate hypocrisy in that way. Where it's like, be consistent. At least, if you're going to champion something and say, Black people can be falsely accused, then look at Michael Jackson and say that same thing, and look it through those lenses, and they will not do that. And so that shows me that there's an agenda going.
Yep. Absolutely, man. I mean, we could have another hour-long discussion about this. Now, one thing I like to do is I like to have an interview on, and then and then if people enjoy it, which they will very much enjoy this, I'd like to bring you back on for a live stream in the future if you're okay with that. So would you be okay with that? So then people can interact with you and stuff like that, because we've gone for over an hour, so we're probably going to wrap this up pretty soon. But it's been awesome having you on, man. And like I said, it's just, it still doesn't really register with me that, someone from the Jackson family is a fan of Geeks and Gamers, and I get to talk to you guys, but it's amazing. So now, do you have any projects or anything that you would like to, get support for or plug or anything like that? The floor is yours. So
I usually don't plug anything, but I have 3 things that, because it's my birthday, I'm going to do 3.
I talked to you in advance. I was like, hey, you're plugging stuff, man. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The first one is Square One. Square One is something that I didn't do. It was this guy, Danny Wu, did. It's a documentary about Michael Jackson, and it's about the earlier allegation, the 93, 94 allegation. And it's super well done. It's on Amazon Prime. Only one journalist or journalistic magazine has had the balls to review it, and that's Film Threat, and they gave it a great review. But it's one of those things that, like, the media needs to see this, and the public needs to see it, because every person that's seen it has said, wow, I didn't know this, or I didn't know that, in terms of just the allegations in that way. Right. And it really puts it in perspective. And if you haven't seen it, I really highly recommend you see it, because it will, if you already believe it, it will confirm it. But if you were on the fence, it will at least open your mind to be like, wow, I didn't know that in that way. And so that one's very highly effective. I didn't fund it or do anything like that. I am one of the people being interviewed in it, and that's about it. And so I did promote it, and I went around and promoted it because I know that I have a name and all that stuff. And so it helped get some of the doors open, but
Okay.
that was my extent of that. The second one, I have a foundation called the DDJF Foundation that me and my brothers created in honor of my mom, and it supports loss and grief, basically. And so we do music therapy classes and certain other things. We have a podcast that we do every Wednesday. And so on Facebook for my birthday, that's what I'm doing. I'm collecting donations for that in that way. And then last but not least, I am doing a documentary on my uncle, basically about all this crap, the media, basically focusing on the media's hypocrisy, because they've been, I don't want to say enemy number one, but they've been basically the one that's kept the lie going for 30 years in that way. When you mentioned your friend, or not, I don't know if it was your friend, but that story about someone that learned only that Michael Jackson was this,
right.
It's only because that's the narrative that they've been offered in that way. And so it's really kind of pulling the curtain back and saying, this is why they did this. This is who was behind this. And, yes, a lot of those people are, karma, and they're again their own, comeuppance. But at the same time, you really do have to see, monetarily wise, and also why we're doing this to my uncle. Right. And so it's called, my uncle had a quote called, "The lies run sprints, but the truth runs marathons." And so it's called The Truth Runs Marathon. And he said that in 2005. So it's The Truth Runs Marathon. It's on GoFundMe. And it's a project that I feel weird asking for money because I'm a Jackson, but it's exactly why I'm asking for money, which is basically, I don't think Hollywood's going to help me in any way. And I think that's the reason. Like, everyone's like, well, why don't you go to people in Hollywood? And it's like, if I can't go to people in Hollywood, because no one is going to want to touch this, or they're going to want to control the narrative. Right. And I can't go to the estate because then they will say it's an estate film. Basically, it's not, in
so
that
you've
way.
You've got to have that direct funding, so you have 100% control of it.
But I feel weird asking for money because I'm a Jackson.
I understand that.
And so I've never really publicly promoted. I took it off my pin thing on Twitter, and just because it doesn't feel right for me to do. But if you do have the money and you do want to see it happen, which we're working on it now, then it is helpful.
Yep, I did demand that he did plug things, so even if he didn't want to. So, but it's important stuff.
It's my birthday, so I'm making an exception. Yeah.
Dang right. So, well, Matt, Taj, it's been a pleasure to have you on. I look forward to having you on again in the very near future. And I think everybody's going to really enjoy this. And there's a lot more we can talk about. There's a lot more
we'll do it on the live. Yeah. I know that your audience will have questions, and they'll be like, "Oh, he didn't answer this." They always do that. Or you didn't ask. You were soft on him, Jeremy, or whatever. Yeah. So we'll let them ask the questions as well.
Can you make it happen? I can get Justin Timberlake on here so I can question him about the Janet Jackson.
I wish he came forward a lot sooner. So.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much. Happy birthday to you. And thank you so much for being a supporter of Geeks and Gamers and giving me, a little bit of time on your birthday, man. I do appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right, everybody. All the links will be below in the description for everything that Taj mentioned. And other than that, just, download some Michael Jackson music and listen to the greatness, or pull up some of his performances on YouTube. If you've never watched Michael, there's nobody like him. There's nobody ever going to be like him. And so you will thank me later for that. You guys have a great day. Taj, thank you so much. And we will talk to all of you later.